Europe has been left in a state of shock after the recent Munich Conference. It brought back the worst memories from history, which ultimately cost millions of lives across the world. Nobody knows what's next for Ukraine, but we know that the transatlantic alliance is breaking up as we speak. The US president wants to strike a deal with Russia on his own. But can it really mean the end of the war? Or is it laying solid ground for political violence and a larger scale conflict? Welcome to the TVP World Studio in Warsaw. Thank you for joining us. I'm Grzegorz Nawrocki, and as usual, co-hosting this show with me is Małgorzata Bonikowska from the Center of International Relations. Welcome.
Thank you. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is still in full swing, even as talks about peace are just starting.
Very strange talks indeed, because Ukraine is not at the table so far, and neither is Europe.
In fact, there are only two chairs in the room right now, one for Russia and one for the United States. And the US president is determined to stop the war quickly at any cost.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
When Russia first launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, few believed it would even happen, let alone that it would stretch on for so long. Ukraine was expected to fall quickly, but its people, military and President Zelensky proved the doubters wrong.
Slava Ukraine.
Seeing that, the West united to support Ukraine with diplomacy and military aid. Over 50 countries rallied behind Kiev, forming a powerful anti-Russian coalition. This resulted in 16 packages of sanctions from the European Union and actions from the United States. Sanctions targeted key Russian industries, financial systems and individuals. However, as the war stretches on, the initial sense of solidarity is beginning to wear thin. The West, though still committed to Ukraine's sovereignty, has grown fatigued. So has Ukraine, as the human and economic toll of the conflict is deepening. Today, heavy fighting continues along the 1,000-kilometer-long front line, and while both sides have suffered devastating losses, the situation on the ground remains fluid. In 2024, Russian forces managed to gain over 4,000 square kilometers of territory, especially in the Donetsk region, while Ukrainian forces hold significant areas in Russia's Kursk region. Casualties are mounting on both sides, with Russia suffering an estimated 420,000 losses in 2024 alone. As we look ahead, new developments are making waves. The Trump administration has made overtures to Moscow, with the US president himself calling Vladimir Putin directly, with the goal of negotiating a ceasefire and ending the war.
We want to end that war. That war would have never started if I was president.
But America's plans to conduct peace talks without Europe at the table has caused concern on the continent. And this year's Munich Security Conference left Western unity cracked as the US turned its back on Europe. Ukraine and Russia have both signaled a willingness to engage in negotiations, but the terms are vastly different. Ukraine insists on regaining its territory, while Russia demands recognition of its gains and a permanent ban on Ukraine joining NATO. Will Ukraine be forced to make painful compromises to bring the war to an end? How much longer can the West sustain its support for Ukraine as the war drags on? And what does the West mean when the US and Europe take divergent paths?
Well, the former Prime Minister of Sweden, Carl Bildt, says that the Kremlin is running short of champagne these days, as a matter of fact. But seriously, the world is watching and waiting for a resolution that may reshape not just Ukraine, but the entire global order. What are we facing, and what might be the consequences of this? Małgorzata Bonikowska will shed more light on the issue.
That's exactly a good question. Let's look at the map once again. We will see the war, the theater of the war. As you can see, unfortunately, still Russia occupies 1/4 one-fourth, almost one-fourth of the Ukrainian territory. Crimea was taken in 2014. But as you can see, there is this line where there are still the parts fight. There is also a small territory, Ukraine, takes over Russia, but the map doesn't look very promising for Ukrainians. Let's now have a look at statistics concerning the war itself, the death tolls of Russia's war, Russian side and Ukrainian side. We are not very sure about these statistics. As you can see, there are some numbers given, huge numbers of killed and injured, but the data could be much more. We are talking even about 1 million who died.
Information is a part of warfare.
Exactly. I mean, is information and disinformation as well.
Of course.
Let's move on the potential right now. If we compare both the sides of the conflict, we can see comparison in military capabilities. Of course, if you just compare Ukraine to Russia, Russia prevails. Many more soldiers, many more weapons. And of course, this is an important position. Of course, that's the strength of Russia, nuclear warheads. Here, a lot, here, zero. But Ukraine had nuclear weapons, but gave up in 1994 for security guarantees.
Which they didn't get.
Exactly. Well, they got, but it was violated by Russia itself. So let's move on another comparison. It's more important, I think, to realize where we are. Economic and demographic comparison. If you compare Russia to Ukraine only again, then Russia prevails. In GDP more, even GDP per capita is more. Ukraine spends more as GDP expenditure for military as GDP percentage, of course, because it's war there. But then let's see European Union. That's the most important here. If we Europeans stand united, see the potential. I mean, we are much stronger than Russia in GDP per capita. Well, the only position is tricky. Defense expenditure. We don't spend enough for military yet.
Yes, the only trouble is in that big if, which you have just said, if we are together, if we are united, and there's a problem with that at the moment.
And also, if we are united, but also if we wake up and engage as far as money to correct this position, we should spend much more for defense.
All right, thanks very much for that insight. It is about Ukraine, obviously, but it is also about what world we're going to live in the years and decades, indeed, to come. The world needs a just and lasting peace, but can it be imposed, ordained by force? The motion tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is the war in Ukraine will end in 2025. And let's hear from tonight's speakers. And let me introduce them to you. For the motion, it's Dr. Paweł Wojciechowski. And please join me in welcoming our guests. Institute of Public Finance, former Minister of Finance, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Welcome to the program. Please take a seat. This time against the motion, Dr. Ireneusz Bil, Chairman of Amicus Europa Foundation, the foundation of former Polish President Aleksander Kwaśniewski. Good evening. Please take a seat. For the motion again, Marcin Wyrwał. Hello. Investigative journalist, war correspondent in Ukraine, Iraq and Lebanon. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Against the motion, Dr. Ewa Frączak, security expert, Center for International Relations. Very pleased to have you on the show tonight. Please take your seats. Yes. And for the summary of this debate, at the end, we're going to be joined online by Elizaveta Jasko, member of Ukrainian Parliament, who's going to be with us live from Kiev. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
And we are very, very grateful you took your time, and we know that you are busy and preoccupied with other things to stay with us for this hour. Thank you for that again. Before we start the show, we've got the results of the voting that's already been done, and the results are the following. 48% of the audience here in the studio in Warsaw is for the motion, agrees with the statement, and 52% is against it, so it's almost half by half, very equally distributed votes. So we're starting with an opening statement, 2-minute long opening statement from each of our speakers, and Paweł Wojciechowski as first. Please.
the split 50-50 tells me a lot that I am also very confused on that, because it's if you judge by what has been happening in the last 2 weeks, in 100 days of President Trump, announcing a couple of things and other key actors, it's very difficult to gather what would be the outcome. But depending on what you mean by war, because if you think by war just a permanent peace and shake hands between Vladimir Zelensky and Putin, everybody is happy and maybe getting Nobel Prize together with President Trump, that will not happen, okay? But if you mean the kind of a statement, kind of a concept that, let's have a ceasefire and maybe a roadmap, agreed for the future to work for peace resolution, international peace resolution, maybe not with the United Nations, but maybe with key powers. That is feasible, and I agree that this is feasible. Why? And I would like to say, of course, Putin will not want to resign from his imperialistic goals. So if you look at the Clausewitz theorem of war, it says, if a policy is there, you could not resign and just withdraw. But of course, the question is, will Putin be forced to agree on some terms and conditions to have a kind of temporary ceasefire before a new wave of armaments or readiness for the new action will emerge, like he did in 2014, when he prepared the ground for another invasion. So this is a key question, and I agree that this can happen. Why it can happen? First of all, I could say everybody today is listening to what President Trump is saying, and I am too, analyzing, it's very complex, and I can say the following. First of all...
just one sentence.
One sentence would be difficult. First of all, J.D. Vance has said in Munich he's not interested in Europe's security.
Okay, Paweł, then we will carry on when we start.
I will not convince you
thank you
because
very
I
much.
forget about my time.
It's just our rule. Thank you very much. Paweł Wojciechowski, the first voice for the motion. Against the motion, Dr. Ireneusz Bil.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In the year 2000, a renowned British historian named Andrew Wilson published a book entitled The Ukrainians, an Unexpected Nation. Well, it was certainly unexpected to a medium-aged Russian politician who, particularly at this year, 2000, became the Russian president. It was Vladimir Putin. But beginning from the year 2000, the Ukrainian nations teaches him a very painful lesson, starting from 2004, the Orange Revolution, from 2014, when the Ukrainians abolished the corrupt President Viktor Yanukovych and faced the first invasion of Russia. They fought against it, but they had to accept the very painful and unjust Minsk agreement. And the Ukrainians also keep teaching the Russians what national integrity, national pride, resilience, courage mean in the last 3 years when they combat the Russian invasion. Why I'm against the notion, why I think that the war will not end in 2024, it's because of 4 particular reasons. First of all, Russia has not achieved any of its goals of the invasion of 2022. First, it has not demilitarized Ukraine. It has not being able to capture enough land, only 20%. It's certainly not enough. They aimed at least for 50%. They have not carried out the so-called denazification, so they have not achieved it. Now, with Trump, they see this is Russia's plan B. They have been waiting, struggling on the front, bleeding, just waiting out that Trump will potentially win. Now they are seeing it as their opportunity, and they will do everything to achieve as much as possible. The second reason is that also Ukraine will not surrender. They have not surrendered in February or March 2022 when they were facing the onslaught of the once mighty Russian army. They are fighting them for 3 years. They will not do it again. And the last 2 arguments against the notion...
And let's keep it for later then.
Okay, then for
Dr.
later.
Bill, thank you very much.
You.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, then the next speaker will actually support this statement that the war in Ukraine will indeed end in 2025. Here's Marcin Wyrwał.
The war in Ukraine will end in 2025. Two little modifications from me. Not war, but this stage of war, and not will end, but may end. So this stage of war may end in 2025. Why? Because Ukraine is almost totally dependable on the West. The West, which is Europe and America. Europe, 35 years since the end of the Cold War, of reckless and, let's put it frankly, mindless disarmament. So we are weak. We may help Ukraine, but we cannot fully support Ukraine in this war. Well, that leaves us with America. America with Donald Trump, who needs a success. He pushes so hard to end what he calls to end what he calls war. He says, "Let's end the war." Yeah, he needs this because he wants to present himself to the world as a successful and effective leader. If Russia makes this kind of deal with Trump, for them it will not be the end of the war, but just a tactical break, just like in 2014-15. Yeah, they stopped, but it was just a tactical break. There's a Russian word for it, передышка. This is the time they need to regroup and rebuild and hit again. That's my point.
Thank you very much. Precisely on time. And finally, Ewa Frączak, against the motion.
Okay, so at the first, it's very important to underline that we are at the very beginning of the peace process. So a lot may change, and we can expect actually everything, even in the next week. So it's really hard to assess the situation now. We can just predict, we can guess. So I think that the war will not end this year. It may change its form, it may change its pace, its speed, but it will not end. Well, let's look at the case from the Russian perspective. According to, I think that Putin, he thinks he's winning, and actually at that stage he's right, I think. So why to end? For him, war is a tool. Yeah, tool to gain not only territories, and he has been quite successful at that, but also to gain some political things. And he also has been successful. Yes, look what has happened. Yeah, now we are talking about G8 one more time. Yes, he has not given any concession, but he has gained a lot without giving anything, actually, at that moment. Secondly, on one side of this conflict, we have Russia, who has not achieved all its goals and is determined to do it. And on the other side, we have Ukrainians, and Ukrainians are not ready to give up. So there's not scope for compromise. So why end now? Thirdly, the last summit in Riyadh is a proof, for me at least, that the war will not end this year. And we have the League of 3 Points plan. And on this plan, at the first point, we have ceasefire. The second are elections, irrational, but they are there. And only the third place are negotiations. So I think it will not happen this year. Thank you.
A lot has happened in the recent weeks, especially after the Munich Security Conference, but things really speed up with almost every tweet of President Donald Trump, which means several times a day sometimes, or a comment made by his representatives. To what extent do you think it is a chaos, a communication chaos, or to what extent is it, some experts say, a new Yalta coming very soon? Yes, please.
I would say it's chaos, maybe, hopefully, with a plan. President Trump is trying to say, I'm like you, Vladimir, I am unpredictable. I want to play hardball. But, you know, I have my other objectives, you know, looking at countries in which we have to deal with, like Europe. J.D. Vance came to Munich and said, you know, pretty much talking about cultural differences, you know, in the world. Like
He didn't speak much about security.
He didn't speak about security. He said, you know, I don't care pretty much about security in Europe. That was the message, you know, underlying the most important message of J.D. Vance. And then, you know, this seems to be chaotic, but it's, you know, in negotiations we have two ideas, you know. You either, you know, negotiate soft, you create a comfort zone, or you negotiate very hard. Hard negotiations, you know, you leave up, for example, the red lines.
Right.
The red lines are given away. But the thing is, with Trump is, he's saying, you know, he wants to create a comfort zone to Russia, to Putin. But he doesn't want to create a comfort zone to Vladimir Zelensky because he wants to deal. And the deal is also about economy.
And just out of curiosity, do you agree
for example,
with that?
Mineral versus...
yes, that it
well,
is a strategy.
not fully, because my impression is, and this is not something out of the air, but it's based on the first period of Trump. Trump is always in the beginning. He's trying, as you said, to enforce some kind of his vision for a peace deal on all the others. But the problem is that even his own administration, even his Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, are lagging behind. They do not know exactly what does Trump mean and how...
Well, they're saying contradictory things.
Exactly, because they do not know exactly what is the agenda, first. And second, as in always in complicated deals, well, the devil is in the details. And when you go to Ukraine with 30 people, it's a very complex war, very complex goals of both sides, contradictory, and Trump does not take any consideration.
On your intuition, what is the agenda?
Well, the agenda of...
Well, you said that the agenda is not clear. The devil is in the details. In your opinion, what is the agenda?
The agenda? Well, I think agenda from this conversation of Russia and United States in Riyadh, I think the most important is point number 3, that both sides, US and Russia, will start to consider what potential beneficial areas of geopolitical and economic cooperation.
Right.
I think this is the major goal of Trump. He's trying to rebuild the international order, probably replacing it with a rule of the jungle. And replacing the international law, because this is his vision of international relations.
So let me come back to the initial question. Is New Yalta approaching? Yes, please.
All right. But, you said that they sometimes say contradictory things. Yes, sometimes, but generally, I think they sing the same song. And about Yalta, some people say, no, let's not talk about Yalta because we have this very negative association. But, well, now, when we think what happened in Yalta and what's happening here, right? Maybe not for Poland. It seems to be
very, very similar.
Yeah, maybe not for Poland, but for Ukraine, two big
as a first step,
powers.
But later on, it applies to the whole region.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. Look, two powers talk above our heads. Okay. Yes, now about Ukraine, but then we don't know. So I hate this association with Yalta. But that actually may be happening right now.
History is speeding up. Dr. Franczak.
Yeah, I agree. It's too early to call it Yalta or anything because we are really at the very beginning of the whole process. And look at the Riyadh summit. Okay, actually, they were not talking much also about treaty there. There were business talks. They were talking about Iran. Because
with swings and turns, yes.
Yes. Why? Because Putin has a long-term plan in head. Okay. I see that he first would like to normalize the relations with the U.S. To get some important deals to reset some relations with the US, and then to continue for the next stages, yes, which is ceasefire, and then both sides are stressing the elections, yes. Why those elections? So we have to think. And Putin knows why, okay? Because the elections, it's a long process, okay? So, and it's also irrational.
All of it on the menu is really a dream list of Vladimir Putin, including the elections.
Yes, because Putin, why he's stressing those elections is clear, okay? Because he would like to have a political influence on the domestic issues in Ukraine, of course.
And who's going to be the next president of Ukraine? Are you not worried by any chance by this political marriage of Putin and Trump? You know, they seem to be much closer than the transatlantic alliance. It seems that there's a new alliance against the European Union, Putin and Trump, something unimaginable just a few weeks ago, or maybe months ago.
I think this is the transactional and dealing nature of President Trump. It's saying, isolated Putin, let's create around him a comfort zone. I hope this is the case. And then tell, Zelensky and the Europeans, you have to get your act together, on reality, But
if you say that if it's transactional, it's quite risky because
it's very risky. It's very risky.
In business terms, we are competitors.
Look at how he's playing with different. He puts everything on the table pretty much, and he can say, well, if they don't agree, I will put tariffs on them, or I would put sanctions on them. So he's saying I can put everything on the table, create a comfort zone, but at the same time he can do whatever he wants because he is a strong man. He's playing the hardball. With everyone today, and the question is, what kind of elements he has around money? For example, I'll give you an example of which I want to say, minerals. There was a proposal to Zelensky to sign the deal on minerals.
An outrageous deal in the first place.
Outrageous deal, 50% of revenues of minerals. Now, for get those minerals, you need investment of U.S. companies to go in Ukraine. For doing that, you need some type of security, right? Guarantees for security. For that, you need to assure, once you sign the deal, I will sign the deal.
This is a big
and then
strategic
once we sign, you go on step by step. You say, I will sign the deal, then I go forward with the negotiation. That means
let me bounce back
that might be as guarantees for security for Ukraine as well.
Well, I think you're right, but not fully. It's not only about money. Look Ukraine is only a litmus test for what Trump has in mind. It's not only Ukraine. Look what he was saying about Mexico, what he was saying about Canada, what he was saying about Greenland. He wants to reshuffle whole Pax Americana, so all the institutional and legal arrangements of the world after 1945. He hates international institutions. The core Republicans are considering withdrawing from the United Nations. They have already withdrawn from the World Health Organization, trying to return, but will withdraw. Probably they will also...
If that's the transaction he's heading for,
he's also probably stop being a member of the World Trade Organization. So he wants, in a nutshell, a world without rules, without institutions, where he can do whatever he wants. And I think it's just the beginning what we are seeing.
Fair enough with Trump for a moment. Let's talk about Putin. What, in your opinion, what are his real intentions? What is he counting on in the political situation that we have now after the Munich Conference, after the Donald Trump tweets and so on and so forth? Real intentions of Putin, what are they?
I think they are just the same. Yes, just the same as they were like in 2007 or 2007, yeah? When in the same conference in Munich, he said, I don't like...
the world order.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I don't like it. I want to change it.
He didn't even care to come this year to Munich Conference, even though they were expected and sort of announced by Americans.
Yes, exactly.
He wants to control Ukraine, to have another Yanukovych or, other puppet like in Minsk.
Yes, that's right. And look how much time we lost as Europe. 2007, we knew it. Then 2014, Putin attacked. We knew it.
Are we waking up now? Do you think Europe is waking up now after what's happening?
I don't really know. Now I see Europe as some group of leaders with really suicidal tendencies. Look what happened after Munich, yeah?
There was a meeting in
gathered
Paris.
And after years of inconsistency and indecisiveness, they had just this one little goal to show minimum of consistency.
If I may just add this, you are a little bit too harsh to Europe because we have 16 packages of sanctions hitting very, very bad Russia. And we have also taken several decisions concerning our reorganization as far as industries. We now help Ukraine more than the US. My question would be
together,
at that moment,
but together, of course.
Together as the EU at the level of, united coalition. What about the real intention of Donald Trump? If there is any plan, which I don't know, you didn't mention China. What if? Do you believe in the theory that Trump may want to dismantle this Russian-Chinese closeness, and that's why
by attracting Russia?
But being a little bit more, at ease with Putin, or not?
Yes, to understand fully what his strategy in Europe, we have to look bigger, because according to Trump and according to his administration, Colby and Rubio, also remember what Rubio said 2 weeks ago. He said clearly that it is the end of one polar moment, that was historical anomaly, even, he said. We are now in the world with multipolar, with many powers in the game, and our priority is not in Europe, We want to go to the Pacific, But to go to the Pacific and be treated there as a serious power, he has to not only have resources, but because the power of the US is not limitless. But please remember about that, because Europeans have a tendency that they have, the bank with as much money as they want. It's not true. Also soldiers and resources. So he has to have some kind of peaceful situation here to focus mostly on China, on Asia.
Let's widen this discussion. Time to take questions and comments from all of us here. Just let me make one point. Among the audience, we also have journalists from the new TVP Foreign Service channels starting very soon. It's Sergei Pelesa from Belsat, the Belarusian service that many of you know very, very well. Yulia Riershova from Slava TV. Welcome, Yulia, Ukrainian service. And Alexandra Shaplina from Votak, the channel, the service in the Russian language. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And time to open up this discussion to everybody. So if there are any questions from you or anybody else, then that's the time.
We have questions here. First question goes here.
I can start as a journalist of a new Ukrainian language speaking TV studio.
Could you please stand up?
Okay. Yeah. So my question is, if Trump really indeed intends to distance himself from Ukraine, from NATO, which European countries can actually take the lead of the security issues, and what would be the role of France, of the UK as the nuclear states in this new architecture of the security?
As a substitute for American involvement. Yes, Irene.
Well, you are speaking about the worst-case scenario that everybody is trying to avoid. Even the Polish Prime Minister said...
But is it possible?
I think, yes, of course, it's the worst-case scenario, but seeing what Trump is doing, it's certainly possible. But I think we have to assure Ukraine that Ukraine will be not left alone by Europe. I think it was a coordinated message from Paris. And we are not on a losing side. Well, nowadays, Europe produces more artillery shells than the whole of American factories. So we would be able to militarily support Ukraine. Probably it would be much costlier. We would have to invest much more into production and deliveries, but it can be done. If there's such a political decision, I think Ukraine can count on consolidated European answer.
So Europe is able to be... Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, well, Europe is actually, doing some steps. For example, there's discussion about the fiscal clause to allow more kind of escape clause for investments in defense. There was a discussion about that. And the second discussion is taking place about how much money to spend on GDP. That will be happening in Hague, in the NATO summit. Probably people are still talking about 3%. So if you take the 3% or 3.5% potentially for the countries which are closer to the border of the conflict, you talk about the amount of spending of armaments on the amount of the United States. So this is the first thing. The question is, could they buy the arms? And is the industry prepared for that?
Right, we mentioned Munich Conference on a couple of occasions already, especially when it comes to consequences for Ukraine and Europe. I recently spoke to Olga Stefanishyna, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Justice of Ukraine. Here's a short part of our talk. What did you see in Munich? Determination or hesitation on the part of Europe?
Yes, I saw hesitation, and I hope that it will follow
Which,
by
in your
action.
definition, it's a definition of failure.
Yes, hesitation is not something that will work this time.
Well, what should happen for the hesitation to be substituted by determination for Europe?
Well, I think that we should start by a smaller thing. While we're thinking about transatlantic unity, we cannot even start the accession process properly. So maybe let's start with the smaller steps and not fail on the smaller steps.
Do you believe that the war will end in 2025, that the war will end this year?
Such wars are not ending within 1 year. The consequences of war will be there for decades. After the restoration of justice will take years and probably decades, but this year will definitely be marked by geopolitical clarity.
Are we going to see this geopolitical clarity this year, 2025?
Well, we spoke about the superpower game. Talking about the United States. It was clear from the before the elections that they were saying we are interested in two security issues. One is our borders of the United States, of course, talking about migrants and drugs, whatever. And the second element is China, the rise of China. So from that perspective, of course, the United States is sending the right signal that actually sent for 15 years now, that we want to withdraw from Europe and let you to provide Europeans to provide guarantees for security of European continent, including Ukraine. So one is security of Europe, another one is an issue of Ukraine. If you don't solve the Ukrainian issue on security, we will not be able to solve and provide
let's take another question
for Europe.
Yes, we have one more here.
We as a journalist, of course, we terrified as long as we're following what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance says recently. So do you think there is a chance that they are acting like magicians and just playing with our attention, make us follow their words and not their actions, since nothing has been signed yet?
I think that we have to wait, because this is the stage where we can observe that Trump decided to use the strategy that for Putin a carrot and for Zelensky something harder, yes? So, and this is his strategy of pressure, and now we are waiting for the next steps. So it's hard to predict what will be the reactions. And also I think that not only Trump is waiting, but also Putin is observing what will happen next. Yes, so really it's hard to predict, because we have to remember that Putin, maybe Trump has a kind of his plans, but it doesn't mean that he is powerful to do everything.
Can I just ask an additional question? Yes, it is obviously it's hard to predict. Nobody denies it. But if you were to look for some source of hope, where would you hope for a lasting peace? Where would you see it, even if things are hard to predict today?
Hope for lasting peace this year, or generally speaking?
Hope for lasting peace, which would start this year. Yes.
I see something.
Okay, let's finish here, and then we'll jump to you.
First of all, we have to have Ukraine at the table, yes? So we have to wait for the moment of these peace talks, or whatever we call it, negotiations, when Ukraine will be at the table, okay? Because it's hard to...
Do you expect it to happen?
I think at one moment, yes, it has to happen, because you cannot force Ukraine, to accept what you want. They can say, no, we don't accept it. And so then...
Okay, back to you, but please be concise, because we're running out of time.
I think Trump's character is to get the money from the world. So I'm talking about he's a business-oriented guy. So he wants to have a peace because it's also for his constituencies of business. For example, Putin said, American business is losing because of the war, 300 billion euro. Or dollars, he's talking about the deal on minerals.
But politics is not all about deals.
Oh yeah,
it's not all about business.
Saying this is a hope. I'm saying this is a hope, because if he's transactional, he wants to withdraw. If you say minerals for security, I mean, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's channel in this discussion.
Okay, let's take another question from the audience. Anybody would like to? Yes, please.
Yes, I have a question.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Rafał Jenner. I'm from University of Economics and Humanistic. My question is it true or it is delusion to think that we can fill this gap? Because I'm not only talking... As Europe, yes, because I'm not only talking about supply of the armaments, vehicles or ammunition, but the most crucial thing for the Ukrainian defense, the American intel, because we heard that Elon Musk and and even the American department can withdraw the support, the Starlink and early detection system.
Sure, thank you very much. What do you think? Yes.
What Europe can do is Europe can support Ukraine financially. We have money as a continent.
We're rich.
Yes, that's right. Intel, satellites, American. Starlink, American. This is the problem. And the last thing is weapons. You said, of course, Europe now produces more ammunition than United States. We talk about this fundamental for the front line.
Versus Russia is still not enough.
Yeah, exactly. Europe produces more artillery ammunition than America, but it's still half of the Russian production. So, so this is my answer.
Since 2014, every year, the expenditures for arms in Europe grew by 10%. And we will increase that, okay? But of course, over there, intelligence and others, it's difficult. One element which Ukraine has is a very strong, the strongest in the world, drone production. And this is, on the border, it's very important to control.
In terms of technology, it sounds quite pessimistic.
Yeah.
When it comes to drones, now we have quite a new situation. A couple of months ago, Russians started to use drones on fiber cable. This is very important because all drones are operated by radio. Radio is jammed because of electronic warfare. Yeah, so Russians started with this kind of drones. They are very efficient, and just yesterday, Valery Zaluzhny, former commander of Ukrainian forces, now ambassador of Ukraine in the UK, said that that's one of 3 points where Ukraine is still lagging behind.
Right. Okay, so another question
here.
Unless you've got a question there.
Adrianna Śniadowska, I'm from the Center for International Relations. I have a question to those of you who say that the war in Ukraine may end this year. And do you think that if it ends on Donald Trump's terms, which means that Ukraine will probably lose a part of its territory, do you think that it will be a signal for Putin that he can go farther, in fact, and maybe in 1 year go to Moldova, in 5 years go to Georgia?
The war will not end as such, because it's fundamental issues for Ukraine, its sovereignty. For Russia is invasion, controlling Ukraine and no sovereignty for Ukraine. So that will not end. But will end potentially the ceasefire with the roadmap. And then there's a question is what will happen next? like in the past, I think that Russia would prepare for another invasion. So we have to provide security
It's one of the scenarios.
guarantees for Ukraine and for Europe, because Ukraine is fighting for Europe.
Any other sentence on that? Very short?
Yes, very short. If Trump does what he speaks about, dismantling the international world order, there will be not only not ending this conflict, but there will be much more conflicts, both internally within the nations and also externally between the nations, in the world that will be the successor of Pax Americana.
All right. All right. Well, will the war in Ukraine end, and on what terms? One of the most fundamental questions, not only here in Eastern Europe, but in global politics. A wrap-up of today's debate from Elizaveta Jasko, member of Ukrainian Parliament from Kiev, live from Kiev, in conversation with Małgorzata Bonikowska.
Welcome back. Lisa, I know you are now in Kiev. You must have very hard feelings. It's 3 years of this war. What are the people in Ukraine thinking about what's happening here in Europe and in the United States?
Well, as you said, we really have very hard feelings. We had these feelings in February 3 years ago. And in fact, also February is very tragic and dramatic month for us, because we had our revolution of dignity, victims killed 11 years ago in February, and 3 years ago, the full-scale invasion completely changed our lives. And it seems as every February, when all the world is speaking about anniversary, we feel how much more we've lost during this, how many lives we've lost, how many infrastructure, how many plants we've lost during all these years.
And now we have American president who is telling Zelensky that he's dictator, and then he, maybe started this war. How you as a politician, as a member of Verkhovna Rada, feel about it? What can you do?
As a politician and as Ukrainian, I think there is no difference. All Ukrainians reacted very negatively to the fact that there are statements coming from the US that are discussing, that Zelensky has a low level of support in Ukraine. First of all, it's not true. Secondly, it's not our main priority in our Ukrainian society now. Our main priority is to end war and to stop Putin's aggression, and to make sure that the new international order that you are talking about, and I'm very glad actually that this program you are talking about it, because in the recent years, like in these 3 years, these kind of conversations were more Ukraine focused. Of course, Poles were always understanding that it's not only about Ukraine, but let's be honest, you were more an exception, but rather than the general trend.
But what do you think can happen now for the Ukrainian side to really jump into the talks? We were discussing here many different, positions from especially US side. What do you think could be the conditions that Ukrainians will agree to talk to Russians?
Number one question is security guarantees. We need to know that there are security guarantees coming from our partners. It can be in a different shape, whether it's NATO or it's another military cooperation or a specific weapon or foreign troops. We're open to these discussions. But until we see that this security guarantees are in place, we believe that it doesn't make sense to have any kind of conversation, because, to make Putin happy that he managed to sign any of the deals without having any security guarantees for us, it's not going to work for Ukrainian people.
But if this makes Trump happy...
I want to emphasize that Zelensky really knows that Ukrainian society will never forgive him if he signs anything against Ukrainian people, and he's very strong in this, and that's very important to remember.
But how do you feel about this problem now Zelensky has with Trump? Trump seems like really offended by the fact that Zelensky rejected the deal about minerals. What can happen next? How do you feel about Americans in this situation?
Well, I think Zelensky spoke very honestly about reality of our world of geopolitics today, and when someone says no to a big country as United States, of course it can be shocking, but I think that it's not only about reaction of Zelensky. It's much bigger than that, because the whole Europe is shocked. Many countries are shocked, and we need to think about the future. It cannot be only a conversation about what Trump said about raw materials deal or something else. For us, it's very offensive that that actually the conversation now lays somehow in the question of what kind of economic deal could it be. We are very sorry, but it's not only about economic deal, it's about international order and security. Yes, we can have our economic cooperation because we are interested in having Ukrainian recovery, and we are interested in having foreign investors and investments in Ukraine, but it cannot be only about economy. It has to be like Ukrainians, we always say it has to be about the values, but I want to say not only about values, about international security, world order, with international organizations, with international law, with understanding what kind of military we have in Europe, what kind of security alliances do we have. If we have gaps, we have to accept that we need to change something and form something.
We were also shocked, but last question, very short answer. If Americans withdraw and will not help, Ukraine will fight if the deal is not good for Ukraine?
We continue fighting. Nothing changes for us. We have this crazy call in our heart. It's very existential for us. We fight until the end because it's our land, it's our soil, it's our life.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a very strong message. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All the best. Thanks for joining. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's time to take another vote in the studio here in Warsaw. Well, we've got the results now already. It's all counted. We started, just to remind you, we started with 48% for the motion and 52% against. No, the difference is actually quite substantial after this debate. Congratulations to the speakers. The results now are the following: 32% for the motion and 68% against the motion. So that's quite a big change. There's no doubt we are in a dramatically different political situation in Europe and elsewhere indeed from where we were just a few weeks ago. The biggest test of the transatlantic world in post-war history is approaching at the speed of light. There's still time and ways to confront it rather than to be crushed by it.
Are we ready? This is an open question.
Indeed.
That's it for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. This was Warsaw Debate on TVP World.
And you can find this and much more content from the region. Just follow us on tvpworld.com and on our social media. For now, goodbye. Thank you.